Who's to blame for the demise of the 2025-26 Maple Leafs? Let's discuss.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. On today's show, we'll recap the Wednesday night slate of games in the playoffs, including a Marlies dominant win over the Amherst in Game 1 of the AHL playoffs. We'll get to the latest on the Leafs GM front, and the Leafs apparently there's interest in Maple Leaf front office members around the league as well. So we'll get to that story. That's kind of percolating. But I want to start. I kind of want to start with a little list, Dave. I want to start with a list today, and it's Thursday, and I love alliteration. You know how much we love alliteration here.
Mm-hmm.
We got a little Thursday 3-pack for you, a little blame list for kind of who's most to blame for how the season went so awry for the Maple Leafs. Because look, no one thought that we'd be sitting here on April 22nd and we're talking about how the season went so wrong instead of teeing up Game 3 of their round 1 matchup. Like, everyone just assumed that the playoffs were just a foregone conclusion in this market and had been for the last 9 years. But man, just so many things went wrong this year, and obviously it didn't happen.
Yeah, no, it didn't happen. And sometimes it's funny because I talk to certain people and they're like, it's tough to look back, right? And, sometimes it can be seen as, is it useful to look back? In this case, when it comes to the Leafs and what happened this year, it is 100% needed to look back and peel through what was a travesty of a season.
Well, I think you have to look back to know, like, were the problems that happened, like, are they fixable, right?
Yeah.
Are they correctable? Or, are the holes so gaping? Did things go so badly that this team is to go in a completely different direction? Like, I do think you need to kind of do an autopsy of
Absolutely.
the Maple Leafs and have that, figure that out. And I'm sure that whoever the incoming GM will be doing this over, well, they're probably doing it now, assuming that they'll get the job in the next few days, as we've been, hearing that news should come about by the end of the week. And I know that they're going to be doing an autopsy over the next couple of weeks as well. So I have put together a Thursday 3-pack, Dave. And it's the blame list, all right? It's the top 3 people in the organization that I put the most blame on for how the season unfolded the way it is. Are you ready for it?
Let's do it.
All right. Coming in at number 1, I actually have Morgan Rielly coming in at number 3, technically, on my blame list. So I've got Morgan Rielly coming in at number 3, and really the biggest reason for that is ultimately no player in the NHL was on the ice for more goals at 5-on-5 this season than Morgan Rielly, and that was the biggest issue. You talked to Craig Berube after the season, and he said, "What was the biggest difference between last year and this year?" He said, "Goals against." That was all he said. Goals against. Well, who was on the ice for the most goals against all season long? Sadly, it was the longest tenured Maple Leaf in Morgan Rielly. On the ice for 78 goals this season, and at 5-on-5, very much the leader in the clubhouse for the Toronto Maple Leafs and for the league. And, the way that he played this season, it was a problem, especially in his own end. And we talked about a lot how defensively they just weren't able to get the puck out. The turnovers were so egregious. This guy was playing 22, 23 minutes a night back there and continually, hemmed in his own end, giving up goals, giving up chances. So for me, we talk a lot about how defensively things fell apart this season. Well, he was kind of the head of the snake of that blue line. So I think he deserves to shoulder a lot of the blame for why things went so poorly this year.
And he's the highest paid defenseman. Like, as the highest paid defenseman, your job is to lead by example. Now, yes, there are players like Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Jake McCabe. Like, there are older players than him on that blue line, but he is the top dog, right? Like, he has always been viewed as the top guy. But what has become apparent for a while is they're constantly looking at ways to improve this blue line without looking at the player that's supposed to be the top guy that doesn't play like the top guy. And they're always looking for ways to get someone that can play with him. To, like, you never hear, I like other teams with their number one defense and say, we got to find someone that can play with.
Oh, Victor Hedman plays with whoever the hell they throw out there and plays at a high level no matter what. Top defensemen elevate their partners. They don't rely on their partners. And, it's always been a conversation of whether or not Morgan Rielly is a top defenseman, if he's a number one D-man. I've never thought that he was a number one defenseman. We've had that conversation so many times. Was he the Maple Leafs number one defenseman? Yeah. But the Maple Leafs also, stunk this year. So that goes to show what that means. I don't even think he's a top pair defenseman anymore. I think this is someone who, is a 3-4 on most teams, and on a good team, he might even be a 5-6, like just a really strong 5-6 on a good team. So I'll be curious to see what happens this offseason with Morgan Rielly. Obviously, we heard from him yesterday. He wants to remain a Maple Leaf. He loves it here. He's got a young family that's growing here. But ultimately, it didn't work out this season. And I would expect that the next general manager coming in, that conversation is going to happen with Morgan Rielly, whether he wants it or not, about his future and maybe how he might have to think about himself in a different jersey moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, look, the problem is really that contract. The expectations on him are to live up to that contract, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought maybe he was going to hit a bit of a turning point in his Leafs, his Leafs tenure in the 2023 playoffs when he had that unbelievable round one against Tampa. He had 12 points in 11 games in that round. I think that was the best I had ever seen him play.
With Luke Shen
as his partner. Right. And it didn't happen, right? Like it didn't take off after that. He put up points, right? But like, I don't think he was terrible the season after, but the playoffs, he wasn't the same player in terms of his ability to, be a catalyst offensively. And then when Craig Berube came on the scene, it got so much worse. Like, you could tell right away, Craig Berube was not a Morgan Rielly fan. Even though he had said, we got to get Rielly going, we got to get him playing, more the way he is supposed to. Never happened.
Just look at the drop off in production, right? Like, the final year of Sheldon Keefe, he had 58 points in 72 games. And the following season, year one under Berube, that drops off and he ends up with 7 goals, 41 points in 82 games, just half a point per game. And it dropped off even further this year. Scored more goals, 11 goals for Morgan Rielly this year, but just 36 points. So, 36 points for a guy who's supposed to be a top pairing puck moving defenseman, it's just not good enough. Like, at the end of the day, it's not. And, if the team's looking to make a big culture shakeup in the room, he's the longest tenure Maple Leaf. I think that's probably the guy you're looking at to really make some significant change in the locker room and on the blue line, where they need to make the most improvements, in my opinion. So Morgan Rielly comes in at number 3 on my blame list. We will take a break. We'll come back. I'll get to number 2 and the top person in the organization I blame for the demise of the Toronto Maple Leafs this season. We'll get to that. Shane Doan it has been asked to speak with the Canucks about their GM position. We'll talk about that. The Marlies demolished the Amherst in game one, and the Oilers and Penguins are in deep, deep trouble. We'll get to all that and more next year on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy Cotton Candy. If you've got a sweet tooth like I do, you know how tough it is to find that perfect treat without all the sugar. That's why Cotton Candy 5 Hour Energy Shot brings that nostalgic flavor back in a whole new way. That is the classic cotton candy taste you remember, but with a tasty caffeine boost and zero sugar. It's a quick and easy way to satisfy that sweet craving while keeping things simple and on the go. I've always loved cotton candy, but I can't be eating sweets all day. This is a perfect alternative. The flavor really does bring that throwback fruity vanilla vibe, and it's surprisingly smooth. I love how convenient it is too. Just a small portable shot. You can just grab whenever you need for a little pick-me-up. Bring on the sweetness with cotton candy 5 Hour Energy Shots, available online now at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon. Today's episode is also brought to you by Hims. ED is way more common than most guys think. Millions of guys deal with it at some point in their life. That's exactly why Hims offered a straightforward way to handle it. Hims connects you with a licensed healthcare provider online, giving you access to legitimate ED treatment options from the comfort of your own home. No awkward appointments, no pharmacy lines, just a straightforward process that makes it easier to take care of yourself. The whole process is simple. You just complete a quick online intake and provider reviews your information. If the treatment is for you, it ships directly to your door in discreet packaging, which makes the whole experience feel private and stress-free. It's straightforward, transparent, and designed to make getting care feel easy. To get simple online access to personalized, affordable care for ED, hair loss, weight loss, and more, visit hims.com/lockedonnhl. That's hims.com/lockedonnhl for your free online visit. hims.com/lockedonnhl. The Locked On Leafs podcast continues. Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti with you, as we are each and every weekday, Monday through Friday, with brand new episodes of the Locked On Leafs podcast. The Buds might be done for the year, but we're not, Dave. We're chugging along all the way through the off season, through the summer, because the Locked On Leafs podcast, baby, we're 365. We're year round on this bad boy. No time off, no days off here on the podcast. So find us and support us, if you will, by subscribing to the Locked On Leafs podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, and also up on YouTube. So we're doing a little blame list today, looking back on the 2025-26 season. And I got a Thursday 3-pack, 3 members of the Leafs organization I blame for how the season went so poorly. I had Morgan Rielly come in at number 3 on my list. Coming in at number 2, Dave, I've got Brad Treliving. Brad Treliving, to me, comes in at number 2 for why the season went so poorly. And pretty much, well, a couple things. One, it was him who built the roster, that put the team together and, made the moves, the trades, the signings that he felt were going to make this team competitive. Yeah, it didn't happen. The team stunk, and it was not built properly. It was built very inefficiently, and he ended up losing his job. But ultimately, it was his inaction, to me, that was maybe most disappointing. It's one thing to build the team wrong, and to have that be a problem, but then to double down and not make the necessary changes to change things up. That to me is kind of what led to his dismissal, right? You can't do that. If there's an issue, you got to correct it. Don't double down on the group over and over and over again, expecting for them to play themselves out of it. It clearly didn't happen. Like, he made 2 moves all season. 2 moves. He fired an assistant, and he claimed Troy Stecher off waivers. That's it. There's no trade. There's no coaching change, with Craig Berube. And we saw all season, how coaching changes can, get a team going in the right direction. A trade can really change and spark things for a team. We didn't get any of that from Brad Treliving. So his inaction, to me, and just continued to let this thing rot from the inside out is a big reason for why I've got him second on my blame list.
Yeah, I mean, and look, like he's the one that put the team together. He's the one that, you know, at the end of the day, it all lends to what his vision is. And unfortunately, it kind of felt like the long-term look, GM sometimes can be, some look too far into the future, some look too far into the present. It felt like in Toronto, there's a lack of balance with that, where, yeah, there were things that he tried to address now, but it cost him a lot of the future. But also, when it was becoming clear that the team was not good enough to make the playoffs, there wasn't that look to the future because the team was still playing as if they had something to play for.
Mm-hmm.
And what's one tool when a coach essentially, knows he's coaching for his job? What's the one thing the general manager can do? Well, you know what? One player's hurt. Let's not make him play more than he needs to, or play like there was never any chance of saying, you know what, we got to ease up on Matthew Nyes in his role. Maybe we got to play him less. Maybe he needs to focus on getting better for next season. That's something the GM can do. When you've got a team that's in the predicament the Leafs were in, yeah, he could have made some more moves to try to salvage it. Maybe he kind of came to the realization that, making all these moves just wasn't really going to do much for the team. But you could have tried to make some trades to get assets, and the only assets they came away with was a first-round pick next season, probably the best team in the league. So that pick is going to be
who scored an overtime game-winning goal that Toronto totally that's. Anyways, we'll need to get into that, but that's the type of goal that Toronto thought that they were going to get from Nick Waugh in the postseason, and they didn't get there. But anyway,
you got a first-round pick from the Avalanche. You got a second-round pick from the Kraken. From one of the, if I'm going to say it, one of the top producers post-trade deadline.
For sure.
And Bobby McMahon, you only got a second and a fourth-round pick for the guy.
Mm-hmm.
Scott Lund, you got a conditional third-round pick and only became the second-round pick because LA just made it into the playoffs and are probably not even going to make it past the first round, but that didn't matter because just getting there was what the Leafs needed. OEL didn't get moved. Like, why was the team so hung dry on keeping a 34-year-old around when the team is needing to get younger and probably could look at some of these young Marlies players?
Yeah, well, there was also I recall a report from Kevin Weeks that teams had kicked tires on Anthony Stolarz. I mean, did that not get explored at all at the deadline? Like, why not? We know that one of the goalies is probably going to have to get dealt this summer. Could have maybe moved him to teams who were kicking tires at the deadline and got something for him, and gave you more of a runway to see what you got, and whether it was Akhtiamov or Dennis Hildeby down the stretch the rest of the way to see who might be ready to assume a 1B role with Joseph Woll next season, right? So I thought that obviously it didn't go well for Brad. Tough season, and it cost him his job at the end of the day. But I didn't put although there may be, Treliving may have more fingerprints on the demise of the Maple Leafs. Ultimately, for me, the guy who truly can make the biggest difference, but didn't this year, Austin Matthews is at the top of the list for my blame list, right? I mean, him not being able to elevate his game to be that all-world player, that MVP caliber player, that 60, goal scorer that he had been, in the previous 2-3 years prior to Berube, him not being able to get to that level for the Maple Leafs completely changes the outlook of this team. Completely. Because, I mean, this is a group that was second in goals against, and they had lost one of their top players in Mitch Marner. They needed a much bigger, a bounce back season from Austin Matthews. It didn't go well last year either, right? In year one under Craig Berube, they needed a bounce back season from Austin Matthews. They didn't get it. They did not get it whatsoever. And we, saw regression from the team. Austin Matthews finished sub point per game for the first time in years. So, for me, that's the biggest issue that the Maple Leafs have moving forward, and the biggest question mark that they have moving forward. Because, if he can get back on the rails, if he can get back to being a true dominant number one, 100 plus point, 50 plus goal guy, along with being a Selke contender defensively, okay, the Maple Leafs will be in better shape and they'll bounce back next season and be a playoff team again. I have no doubts about that. But if Austin Matthews is going to be, a 30 to 35 goal scorer, if Austin Matthews is going to be a 70 to 75 point man, I'm not so sure that this team will have that much success next year either. They need him to be an absolute superstar. He wasn't that for them last year. He was not that for them this year. And they needed it. They were banking on it, relying on it. And obviously it didn't come. And that to me is sadly the biggest reason for why the Maple Leafs, were in the position that they're in. Just simply the fact that Austin Matthews couldn't get back to being that true top 5 player in the world that he had been. The Leafs need that for them to be competitive again.
Yeah, the fact what doesn't help Austin Matthews' case is we have no idea what he's going through physically, right? We have had
all season up until the injury, obviously up until the hit from Radko Gudas. We had been told all season from his camp, from the Maple Leafs organization, that he's healthy, that there wasn't any injury. And I mean, it was questioned at times throughout the season, but then he went and he had an unbelievable Olympics. And then he came back from the Olympics and went back to being, an elite player, but not an all-world player. And that's what the Leafs need out of him.
Yeah, and really, if you want to look at an example of what you look at a game, I was at the game too. It was the New Year's Day game against the Jets, where he had a hat trick, and he thought, this is the Austin Matthews. Yep. That's him. That's what the Leafs need if they want to be a playoff, a contending team. So what it wasn't getting him there, right? Part of it, yes, he tends to not want the puck as much, and he wanted to be a facilitator. Austin Matthews has never been a facilitator at any point. Is he trying? Are they trying too hard, as we talked about it before, making him a defensively responsible player? Now, a Selke two-way shutdown player like a Barkov. Well, we know that's not supposed to be his game.
I mean, right? He can be. He's good enough for that.
He's good enough to be a good, responsible defensive player, but we don't. They don't need him to be Ryan O'Reilly.
Shutdown. Yeah, he doesn't need to be their shutdown guy.
He doesn't. That's the whole point of getting a Nick Waugh and a Scott Lawn, so that your Austin Matthews doesn't have to do that stuff.
Yeah, they didn't utilize them properly.
No,
this year, the underlying numbers wise, in terms of goals against per 60, it was the third worst of his career for goals against per 60, but worst of his career by a pretty large margin in expected goals against per 60, giving up more scoring chances and high danger chances than any other year in his career. 13.15 high danger chances per 60, which is far more than typical. I mean, last year was 9.5, 10.73 the year before that, 8.03 a couple of years back in the Canadian division year. It was almost double, over 13 high danger chances per 60. And for the first time and only time in his career, he was a minus player in expected goal percentage. Just 47% of expected goals while Matthews was on the ice this year were in favor of the Maple Leafs. First time in his career that happened. So again, the proof's kind of in the pudding. When this guy is an all-world player, and when he's tilting the ice and the game is in the Maple Leafs' hands a lot more often when he was doing these things last year and years prior. Things were going well for the Maple Leafs. This season, it did not work out that way. And I think that's a big reason why they just could not figure it out. They're always relying on Austin Matthews to get it going, to turn the ship around this year. Had that one little burst, as you mentioned, coming off of that Christmas break, in and around New Year's, but that was about it. And then when he came back from the Olympics, just never really had the same gas. And then the Radko Gudas hit came, ended his season prematurely, and you only get 60 points out of the guy, or 60 games out of the guy, and 50 some odd points, like all career lows this season for Austin Matthews production wise. And it was kind of tough to see. And if you're the Leafs, you got to make that determination. Like was that scheme, was that coaching, or was that regression? And you kind of have to figure that out moving forward. And if you're the GM, I think that's the question I think you have to answer in order to decide what you're doing with Craig Berube. Because, again, you look at the numbers the last 2 years compared to the years prior when it was Sheldon Keefe at the helm, his numbers are down drastically. His offensive production at the very least. And that's not good for the Maple Leafs. They can't have that.
Very problematic.
Very problematic for the Maple Leafs. So the incoming GM has to figure out, like, again, is this due to injury? Is this regression in his career? Can he not get back to being that player? Or is it because he's being asked to do a little too much in the defensive end? Is it because of the scheme that he's being asked to play from Craig Berube? If that's the case, you got to move on from the coach then. Like, for sure, to salvage Matthews' career, you got to move on from Craig Berube if you think that might have been part of the reason why Matthews has seen a downturn in the last 2 years since Berube has come to town.
Yeah, like, to me, that, like, if there's a reason you don't keep your coach around, if you're seeing regression from your top player, your most important player, now, does Austin Matthews take responsibility for that as well? Absolutely. But if he's not being in a position, or if he's not being coached to his strengths, then you find a coach that's going to come in and say, I'm going to get Austin Matthews to be more like Austin Matthews.
Yep.
It won't be, if Austin Matthews is not able to perform, it's not going to be because I'm not putting him in the position to succeed. It's going to be, then the onus shifts, right? And I know people say, oh, they're going to give him another coach. How many coaches has Connor McDavid had? Now, Connor McDavid has never had the struggles that Austin Matthews has had, but I think we got to get rid of the idea that you can't be constantly trying to find coaches, because
let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
When you look at Matthews and the year that he had, and obviously not a good season for Austin Matthews this season, it was all pretty much career lows across the board. Let me just see if anybody counts, see what his actual totals was this year. 27 goals, which was a career low this season, 27 goals and a total of 53 points. Also a career low for Austin Matthews. 11% shooting percentage, lowest individual expected goals of his career, lowest amount of high danger chances. Like we talked about it, tons and tons of regression here this season, and really in the past 2 seasons. So if you had to split it up on a pie, though, Dave, whether those numbers and that regression is due to injury and is due to him physically not being able to be that all-world player he was 3-4 years ago, or is it what he's being asked to do and the scheme that he's playing? Like, if you had to put it in a pie chart, how would you divvy it up, you think?
I think injury, you could probably put that at about physically 40%, because I think there was data to show that he wasn't shooting it the way that we had seen him shoot it. He wasn't getting himself to the areas that the speed wasn't there either. The speed had gone down. So I think injuries had taken a toll in that regard. I think mindset or the way he kind of came about it, I probably give that a 20%.
Okay.
Because I think he was still coming in with the mindset of trying to play the right way and play the way the team needed him to play to win, which then leads me to the rest of it, which I think is coaching. Because I'm sure, and I don't have the numbers for you. Have probably more of the numbers in front of you.
Yeah.
His usage, where was he used most? Right under Craig Berube the last couple of years versus under Craig Berube, right?
Or under Sheldon Keefe.
Under Sheldon Keefe. Like what was the difference in usage? Now, I don't mind that Craig Berube feels he needs to get Austin Matthews to be more responsible defensively, but he also shouldn't be primarily seen as the top defensive guy option to go out there.
So you go. So this year, his D zone starts actually dropped. So last year, his D zone starts was 46%. This year was 42% for the Maple Leafs. But under Keefe, going back to his final year with Sheldon Keefe, 33%. The year before, when he was an MVP caliber player, 25% defensive zone starts with a 74% offensive zone start. So. Yeah, when you start in the offensive end, no wonder you end up having yourself a solid season. Like that's kind of how it's going to work. So yeah, the year that he won MVP, what do you have? 69% offensive zone starts that year, basically 69.9%. Essentially 70% of the time he was starting his shifts in the O zone. Yeah, no wonder. Compared to just 57% of the time this year. So, like that's a pretty significant change. And pretty much in his entire career, 1 year aside, he was starting in the O zone at least 65% of his shifts on average in his season. And all of a sudden, it's closer to 50-50 with Berube. Yeah, no wonder we see a bit of a drop off there. The usage just alone. Kind of speaks to maybe why that happened. But again, that is something that the Maple Leafs will have to try and figure out as they move forward and decide, if we're going to retool this thing, it's with the expectation that Austin Matthews of 2 years ago arrives. Not that he needs to score 69 goals. I think you need 50 out of Matthews every year. You at least need to be that 50-goal scorer chasing down a rocket. And is he physically capable of doing that? You got to figure that out. Or is it just the coaching that kind of held him back the last 2 years? That is the number one question I think that the incoming GM will have to answer. And we'll see. We'll see what happens. Should get that answer in the next couple of days here. We're supposed to hear from Leafs ownership on an answer. They said possibly by the end of the week, the insiders are hearing, we could hear who the next GM of the Leafs could be. All right, we'll take one more quick break, Dave. When we get back, let's quickly recap the Marlies win over the Amherst and Shane Doan getting some love from out west Leafs AGM. We'll chat about that next here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. There's nothing like playoff hockey live. The intensity, the rivalries, the crowd. It's just different when you're in the building. Playoffs are some of the best moments in sports, and being there in person is something every fan should experience. Gametime makes it incredibly easy to find tickets, even for those high-demand playoff games, in just a few taps. And with the Gametime guarantee, you're getting 100% authentic tickets delivered on time at the best price. I was browsing my app the other day, checking out some of these playoff matchups, and there's some incredible seats still available, even for the games you think are impossible to get. I'm down in the Niagara region. I wanted to check out the Buffalo game. I found tickets for a good price and in good seats, all using the Gametime app. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code Locked On, for $20 off. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you. The Maple Leafs done for the year. The Baby Buds, a victory in Game 1 of the playoffs for the Toronto Marlies. A 5-0 drubbing against the Rochester Americans, the Buffalo Sabres farm team. And your boy, the Artie Party, came up huge in this game with a shutout. And Vinny Lettieri had a hat trick. Bo Grew, the legend of Bo Grew, continues. He scored a goal. Easton Cowan had a point. You watched the game. Big win for the Marlies.
Utter dominance. Like, they're not just out shooting the Americans, like pretty badly. They outshot them. Like, the Americans looked absolutely brutal. Vinny Lettieri was just an like every time he took a shot, thing went top corner. Like, he was just rifling it.
He couldn't get a sniff with the Leafs.
No. Guy has a hat trick in the opener, but he never was thought of getting a little taste of coming back to the NHL.
And he was a July 1 signing, so like he was a priority add for this team too. And I know that he was added with the thought of him being an AHLer, but to not even give him a sniff. I mean, the guy can clearly score. He's one of the top scorers in the on the Marlies this season.
And again, it just goes back to why are you bringing these guys in if you're not going to give them opportunities? Like, you're telling me there were guys on this team more deserving to play than Vinny Lettieri? Like, annoying. You did bring up Bo Grew. He only had one goal, but my goodness, the set of hands on the goal, like the concentration was a pass in front. He had to kind of corral it and get it past the goaltender for Rochester, who guy was under siege all night. Kind of feel bad, but also not feel bad.
Dennis.
Yeah. So it was just brutal for Rochester. Easton Cowan, the point he did have was on the power play where he does a nice behind the back pass to Lettieri, and he absolutely rifled it. And the Akhtiamov, somebody, I was having a conversation with someone. It's like, is the Leafs hierarchy for third goaltender kind of changing a little bit here? Because there is a goalie right now who not only got game one, and I know, look, I give the Marlies head coach a lot of credit for trying to cool down any goaltending drama by saying like it was a coin flip. We would have been great with any of the two guys, but Akhtiamov proved that it's his net right now, and I'm sure with all the talk about Hildeby, what are they going to do? He needs waivers. Maybe if a team is looking for a young goaltender, the Leafs might just want to either, if Stolarz is someone that no team wants right now and his value just isn't there on the market.
The Hildebeest?
The Hildebeest. How many teams? There are teams right now getting through the playoffs with a lot less than what Dennis Hildeby could provide. Like Dan Vladar, who thought he would be?
He's playing well.
He's played well this season.
He's had a really good season. But Connor Ingram,
Connor Ingram, right?
I mean, I know he's been to back-to-back Cup finals, but Stu Skinner not really playing very well.
Like, you're telling me Kyle Dubas wouldn't sniff around at a Dennis Hildeby being out there. He was the one that drafted the guy.
Him. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I think he would have some interest if that.
The Hurricanes have always been looking for goalie. They've got like 3 or 4 they've tried, and now Freddie Anderson has looked good in this series, but
I just can't stay healthy is the issue. They all work. No matter what goalie goes there is amazing. James Reimer was like an all-world goalie when he was in there. Dave, they made a Zamboni driver look good in front of that structured defense. So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, you can have anyone suiting up in net in Carolina, clearly.
Yeah, I'm thinking that this is gonna the way. I mean, look, you win that big in game 1. Obviously, game 2 you're expecting a big response, but I'd be shocked if the Marlies didn't get this done get it done and sweep them, because it's a 3-game series, so they'll be done. If they can get it done on Sunday, they'll be moving on. It's gonna be tough after this, but I mean, That team is humming right now. There's
Hey,
a lot of, and
more
they were
experience.
willing to mix it up. They weren't shying away from the physical play or post whistle shenanigans. So
Yeah, and I'll say this too. Guys like Bogru, guys like Luke Hames, guys like William Villanove. They did come up. Even Aktiamov, they did come up at the end of the year and get some minutes with the Maple Leafs, get some minutes playing NHL action. And so many times you hear about guys when they come up and they get that little taste and they know what it's like to play in the NHL and they have to play and adapt to that speed. When they go back down to the Marlies and Easton Cowan's in this boat too, the game slows down. It's a slower pace and they can, process and think things quicker because they were forced to do that at the NHL level, and it allows them to really start to find their game. So I think there's a number of guys who could really take off and have a very successful playoff who got some NHL minutes, figured out what it's like to play fast, and can apply that and utilize that to dominate in the American League. So excited to see what the Marlies can do here. The Leafs aren't in the playoffs, so we got to root on the Marlies here, and they start with a 5-0 win over the Rochester Americans. Would you say Game 2's when? Sunday
afternoon, 4
Long
o'clock.
layoff. Is it like 4 days in between games?
Yeah, it's a little weird, right?
Interesting.
Wait, did I get that wrong? Hold on.
Maybe Sunday could be Game 3.
No, sorry, Friday's game.
Yeah, I was gonna say Sunday
is
is Game
3
3
in Rochester, and then Sunday is Game 3 if necessary.
in Toronto.
In Toronto, yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense. That makes way more.
Friday night, 7 o'clock. I'll be at a wedding, so I'll have to get the recap on that.
Yeah, we'll read the paper afterwards to see how it went. All right, Dave, that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. Thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.